Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Classic Album War. We're a day late with this one, but better late than never, I always say. Today we're going to look at two British heavy metal heavyweights. Okay, one band has been at this point in time. We're talking 1982 here. One of the band had been around for a decade or more, right? At that point, the other was kind of like a fresh upstart. They had two studio albums before this particular one, and actually wound up opening up for the other band, right? On big tours and stuff right around that time. So both landmark albums for each band. Both probably, one of the two of the biggest heavy metal releases to start off the whole 80s decade, right? Kind of paved the way for a lot of stuff that came after it. So the first one we're going to talk about here, released in March of 1982, produced by Martin Birch, Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden. Okay, here we've got the first album with Bruce Dickinson on vocals, replacing Paul Di'Anno. All right, Clive Burr on drums, Steve Harris on bass, Adrian Smith and Mr. Dave Murray on lead guitars, right? A great album, one of their most popular albums. Both of these albums sold well in excess of platinum status. The Number of the Beast, of course, has got in the kickoff track Invaders, Children of the Damned, great tune, very melodic tune. The Prisoner, 22 Acacia Avenue, my personal favorite Iron Maiden song of all time. The title track, Number of the Beast, perennial favorite, perennial live favorite. Run to the Hills, kind of a FM radio hit for the band, so to speak. Gangland, and the mighty Hallowed Be Thy Name, which for a lot of people is one of the best Maiden songs of all time. Also one of my favorites too, easily my second favorite song from this album and one of my favorites from their catalog, definitely a top 10 favorite. So for me, this is a great album, okay? Arguably, I might like Peace of Mind, the follow-up, a little bit better, okay? Arguably, I might like Killers, the preceding album, a little bit better, but, for me, there's two songs on here which are top notch Iron Maiden. That's Hallowed Be Thy Name and 22 Acacia Avenue, but a lot of other really great tunes. All right, I think top to bottom, this album is really, really strong. As is the next one, released in July of that same year, 1982, produced by Tom Elam. Okay, Screaming for Vengeance. Okay, this is, again, in some ways a bounce-back album for the band. Okay, they started off the decade. You got British Steel, obviously. Before that, Hellbent for Leather. You got Point of Entry, which was a decent seller, but a little bit of a kind of blip for Priest, right? Coming off the red-hot British Steel. I think they got back to doing, what Priest does best. I know a lot of people love the Point of Entry album. There's some fine material on there. Not the heaviest Priest album in the world, right? But they got back to their heaviness, all right? Their metallic heavy metal mayhem on this album. Screaming for Vengeance, followed by Defenders of the Faith, almost like part two of this album. But this is a really, really strong album. You've got the Hellion and Electric Eye leading off, a great kind of 1-2 punch there, Electric Eye, kick-ass song. Riding on the Wind, fantastic. Bloodstone, possibly my favorite song on this album. Great tune. Take These Chains, kind of accessible tune. I'm not a big fan of Take These Chains. Pain and Pleasure, decent song. Another one of my not favorite tunes on this album. Title track, Screaming for Vengeance, is fantastic. Another standout on this. You've got Another Thing Coming, obviously was their big hit. Still a favorite of many fans today. A really good, accessible, commercial-sounding heavy metal track with a great hook. One of those tunes I've probably heard to death over the years and tend to not listen to much anymore, but still I'm aware of its greatness. Fever, kind of a cool tune, right? And then Devil's Child, I kind of like Devil's Child. It's a pretty decent tune. So I played both of these albums to death back in the day. This was the time where, Maiden and Priest and Scorpions and Sabbath and Purple and Zeppelin, that was kind of my thing, right? All my favorite bands, Ozzy, all that kind of stuff. And I remember going to see both of these bands live many, many times from here on in. And I love both of these albums. These were both really important albums for both of these bands. Like I said, big sellers. Many of the tunes on these albums have been favorites for the fans for many, many years. Both very well produced albums, okay? So they're pretty on par with each other. However, you know, the purpose of the show is for me to pick a favorite. It's hard to pick from these two because I love them both so much. But I'm going to give a slight edge to Number of the Beast, simply because I think, like, top to bottom, all the tunes, for me anyway, are really, really strong. I have some that I favor over others. I have a couple that I'm kind of not as much into others. But, you know, and that's not to say I don't like this album, because I absolutely do. There's just maybe 3 tunes on here that, and maybe if you count Another Thing Coming, which I don't need to hear anymore, you know, maybe 4 that I'm not a huge fan of. The rest I absolutely adore. So I'm just going to give the edge ever so slightly to Number of the Beast, because I just think it's a stronger album start to finish. But again, you may think otherwise, and that's cool. We all like what we like. We all hear things differently. We all have our favorites. Nobody's right or wrong here. It's just a matter of personal preference. But the important thing is 2 very, very important heavy metal albums of the early 80s. You know, you could argue that Priest had stronger albums before or after it. Same with Maiden. Okay. But both of these are easily top 5 releases for either band. Maybe, you know, top 3 for some of you. So this is on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube every damn day. So, yeah, today's result, split decision for Number of the Beast. 116, 112, 114, 114, 115, 113. All right. So we'll see you again real soon. We've got another one coming up. We're going to get back on track here. So don't touch that dial. We got another one coming up in moments. All right. So stay tuned. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.